Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Hannibal, starring Anthony Hopkins, Julianne Moore, Gary Oldman, Ray Liotta, and Giancarlo Gianni, directed by Ridley Scott. Now, before I get into this, I've heard of this movie when it was first coming out, and I've never seen it in theaters, but I happen to have seen it years later. I forget how many years later, but I remember it being kind of, well, this is what the show's for. Let's get into the movie. We open with Barney, who was the nurse last time, being interviewed by Mason Verger, played by Gary Oldman, as he asks about the events that occurred from Silence of the Lambs. As Barney answers the questions and gives him the mask Dr. Hannibal Lecter, returned by Anthony Hopkins, wore while in person. And as he's living under exile while a disgraced FBI agent, Clarice Starling, played by Julianne Moore this time, which Jodie Foster didn't want to come back because this was a terrible script, and I agree, who's not very good as the character. Jodie Foster played it in a better movie, in my opinion, and her accent is so bad as she tells an officer in Washington from the Washington D.C. Police Department named Bolton has a smart mouth as he gets himself shot at while trying to get a suspect in jail, and gunshots are being fired and gets an old friend of Clarice shot down to the ground while she had a baby as she feels sad about it. And honestly, this opening sequence sucks. As this is so far an ugly looking movie that's repeatedly disgusting as hell. Clarice gets in trouble by the Justice Office Paul Kindler, I don't know if I'm saying that right, played by Ray Liotta, as they finish the meeting and they tell about a top 10 most wanted list as she goes to Mason Verger, who is pretty upset at Hannibal for putting him in the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. And for what reason? It was never explained, as this movie makes no fucking sense whatsoever. Clarice goes to Mason's mansion to talk with her as the character has a fucked up face. And for what reason? He invited Hannibal to dinner one evening. Hannibal fucked him up by setting up a trap and cutting his face up as part of entertainment, which is horribly disturbing as a flashback. And the problem I'm having is this story is very hard to follow as it can get graphic at times as they show the violence, whereas in Silence of the Lambs, you can imagine it in your own mind. And here they just show it to you, and for unexplainable reasons. Clarice goes to Barney to ask about Hannibal as she is looking for him as she gets tapes from Hannibal talking about how good Clarice tastes from eating her. And the scenes go on a little too long as this movie is 2 hours and 12 minutes long. And I think it needs at least 12 minutes cut out of the movie as this movie kind of drags. Hannibal gets encountered by Ronaldo Pazzi, played by Giancarlo Gianni, to investigate Hannibal, where Clarice finds an envelope with a note written by Hannibal himself to Clarice about her disgraced times as she puts Hannibal on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, as she wants to find out when he wrote the letter while listening to their conversation from Silence of the Lambs. And director Ridley Scott is a terrible choice to direct this movie, in my opinion, and after Gladiator, as he's no Jonathan Demme. Inspector Pazzi searches on the internet for Hannibal under the FBI website, as he plans on taking him in himself, while Paul comes in to Clarice's office, as Julianne Moore's accent comes off and goes in just not just this scene, but this entire movie, while the scenes Inspector Pazzi were just terrible, as he's trying to get tickets to the opera with his wife, and he's a bad husband, just straight up ignoring her. And I'm thinking about where the fuck is this movie going? Pazzi goes to a phone booth to make a call in America as he's disconnected, and the phone line calls back and gives him a number of the FBI, but in Rome, as he visits Hannibal, as he's a doctor under a different name, Dr. Vell. Yeah, Dr. Vell. And as Hannibal snaps a picture of Pazzi, and Pazzi tries to interrogate Hannibal as Hannibal makes the room darker while they're talking, and this movie is absolutely fucking boring as it goes on and on until I'm bored out of my goddamn mind. As I'm trying to take notes, the movie bores me as the story in this sucks. The movie shots are pretty damn poor, as Ridley Scott knows how to make a beautiful looking movie, as this isn't the one of them because it looks pretty damn ugly. A pickpocket tries to follow Hannibal around, and as they bump into each other, he gets a thing from Hannibal while he gets stabbed, as it was Potsy's pickpocket as he chooses to die. And I don't really want to follow this movie anymore because I don't like the characters, including Hannibal, which is a shame, as he was the best character last time, but now he comes off very unlikable. Inspector Potsy goes to the opera with his wife when Hannibal happens to be there, and after the show, they talk with each other and gets her a valuable piece of paper, which has no point of being in this movie while Clarice tries to find Hannibal as she spots on a tape from room as Clarice calls Potsy. Now she knows he's trying to capture him himself, as she strongly advises against it, and he rudely hangs up the phone while Hannibal gives the presentation of the times of Judas killing Jesus of Nazareth. And I've just had it with Potsy as the character's encounter with Hannibal is just taking way too long, as this is reminding me of Manhunter in a very bad way. Hannibal finds out Potsy is trying to take him in, and Hannibal drugs him and asks him if he told anyone about following him while torturing him, as Clarice calls Potsy, while Hannibal answers, and that's when I wanted to watch this entire movie. That's what I wanted to watch this entire movie. Clarice and Hannibal talking to each other and have a little fun with each other. But we get Potsy's death, and I thought, good fucking riddance, because the character was getting on my nerves. And that's where I've got to blame the actor, as his performance is bland, in my opinion, or maybe I'll put the blame on Ridley Scott on second thought. We see Clarice jogging like the classic shots in Silence of the Lambs, but here it's not the same with Julianne Moore, in my opinion. Mason calls Paul to give him $5,000 to frame Clarice for not getting Hannibal, as Paul was working for Mason, while the motherfucker is happy to get Clarice out of the FBI, while Hannibal visits Paul's house to grab an envelope from his place and sneaks around the hospital. For what reason? I'm not too sure if I want to care as this movie is pretty damn bad. Clarice comes home while Hannibal happens to be in the house, as he gets out and pulls an advertisement with Gucci, which was funny because Ridley Scott did come out with a movie called House of Gucci, which looks very good. By morning, Hannibal calls Clarice to get her on the road to find Hannibal himself and try to turn him in, as Mason wants to get Hannibal dead, while Clarice is getting spied on by the FBI while talking with Hannibal, as he disappears once again and gets tased by Paul's men. They take him to Mason, and the scene was annoyingly filmed, as there were times I was getting frustrated with the movie for doing things that unacceptable way. Hannibal gets to Mason's mansion to talk with Mason, as the score in the scene was obnoxious, and Mason invites Hannibal to dinner with him, and Clarice shows up when nighttime comes with some men, take Hannibal to the barn where giant pigs feast on Hannibal, while Clarice is looking around for Mason and Hannibal, as she reaches Hannibal and is knocked out while Hannibal carries Clarice, and as Mason arrives, Hannibal tells Mason's assistant Cordell to push him off as he's insulting him, as he does, and he gets eaten by the pigs, and Hannibal drives Clarice home and gets a sparkler in Paul's house for the 4th of July, while Clarice wakes up on a bed in a lake house as she's drowsy, and so is Paul, as they're about to eat dinner together along with Hannibal Lecter. While Clarice gets a phone traced from the inside of the house, we see Paul's head getting cut open, and his brain is getting tendered as he eats his own brain, which is fucking disgusting, by the way. As this entire scene in the movie, as Clarice tries to knock out Hannibal as they wrestle and traps her hair in a refrigerator, next thing you know, kisses her, and as she handcuffs him on her, and he lets her go as long as she lets him go, And the climax sucks, and so does this movie. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.1 out of 10. The movie is fucking disgusting with very bad looking cinematography, as this movie is very poorly shot. I don't like the characters, including Hannibal Lecter, which is a real shame, as Anthony Hopkins was the best thing about it last time. But here he comes off very unlikable, and this movie is pretty damn bad, boring, as this shouldn't exist as a movie. And Ridley Scott does a terrible job on directing his way in a Hannibal Lecter story, as this is a real disappointment after The Silence of the Lambs. This movie really sucks. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Red Dragon. And until then, ta-ta.